Yeah. Yeah, just not my thing. I'd rather just talk to theists and Christians and uh and have debates and things like that. That's what I enjoy the most. It's just hard these days to get theists to come on the channel. That's the most difficult part. I have to book people weeks in advance and then they cancel last minute
They get
for
scared.
whatever reason.
They're terrified.
Sometimes
they know
I don't know.
you're gonna ambush them with
Well,
questions.
You know what's funny about that is that they think that they're right and God's on their side. And I don't know what's so terrifying about talking to me, some lowly non-believer on the internet. I don't know what they think's what I'm gonna do for my Bible knowledge, but I don't know, man.
I had Cameron Bertuzzi turn down a debate with me on proper functionalism a couple of days ago.
We are in the works with him, and I'm trying not to scare him away.
Yeah, you have to be really careful.
Oh, it's like kids' gloves. I got to put kids' gloves on. I got to be real gentle with him, massage his balls a little bit, and get him to trying to get him to come on. He's agreed to a debate. He's already agreed to do a debate with me. But that was like a month and a half ago, and I kind of messaged him. I was like, "Hey, we're gonna schedule this debate. Let's just choose a date. I'll take off work. I don't even care. Literally, you give me a date, I'll make sure that date happens." But I have a feeling, and I hope this isn't the case, but I have a feeling he's gonna back out last minute. So we'll see. Hopefully that isn't the
Yeah,
case.
he will. He's done that. So I set up, when I was his friend, back when I was still talking to him, I set up 4 debates for him, and he backed out of every one of them. Every debate.
How many did you say? 4?
4.
Really? And what was it? Every time something came up, or he was busy, or
he so he would drop out of negotiations, right? So at one point, the big debate that everybody wanted to have was Cameron Bertuzzi and Josh, right? Realistic Nihilist.
Mhm.
And so I tried to set that up, and he agreed to the debate, and then wanted to bring in Tyler McNabb. And then so it became like Jack Angstrike, Realistic Nihilist, versus Tyler McNabb and Cameron Bertuzzi, when the whole goal of the series of debates on Reformed epistemology was to get Jack to go after Tyler. But Cameron just wanted to sort of hide behind the pant leg of Tyler McNabb during the debate, so he could just sit there and be quiet and let somebody who knew what the fuck they were talking about actually speak.
Well, we're supposed to do a 2-on-2, so it's supposed to be Dr. Josh and I, and then I told him he could pick a partner. So he hasn't told me who the partner will be. Someone told me it will probably be Inspiring Philosophy if he goes through with it.
Oh God.
Yeah, I've been trying to get a
second
debate. I've been trying to get a second debate with him for a while, but it's very, very difficult. Yeah, the frustrating part with IP is that when we were setting up a debate on morality, he refused to connect it in any way to his religious beliefs, to his Christianity. We wanted to originally do a debate on whether God exists, and I was like, okay, well, we could do God exists, but you're going to stick to the Christian God. We're not going to have a general, is there some kind of God out there debate? It's just not interesting to me, and I don't really care. So I was like, hey, let's just do, is the God of the Bible true? Nope, he wouldn't do that. Then I was like, okay. I was like, well, what are we going to debate then? He's like, well, we can debate morality. I was like, we can debate morality. And he's like, okay. And I was like, well, listen, I said, the only thing that I ask is that we argue from our own positions, because I don't want to get in a situation where I'm hearing some form of non-Christian version of objective morality. I can get behind that. I can respect those type of positions. But if you basically just want to have a debate with me on secular morality, nothing to do with your God, it's not interesting or fun to me. And during that debate with him on Modern Day Debates channel, it just that you can see that's what ended up happening. I forced him to have to talk about God, and when he had to talk about it, didn't go so well. I'll be right back.
Yeah, that needs to happen. I hope that debate works out, because even if they try and be philosophical, I mean, you guys you can deliberate about a proposition that rests on the historical references in Scripture, and you and Dr. Josh are just going to kill that shit every time.
No, and I think too, the thing is with the philosophy talk, I'm fine with, as long as we break down our terms, right? Because what I find with not real philosophers, people who really know their stuff, but these YouTube Christian philosophers, they don't know really what they're actually saying. And I think they just regurgitate shit that they read online by their favorite apologist. But when you really get down to, well, what do you mean by that? Like, what are you saying there? Like, for instance, when talking to IP, he kept talking about morals having moral intuitions. And I was like, well, what the hell is a moral intuition? How do you, like, is it a feeling? You just feel that something's wrong? He's like, no, 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 it's not a feeling. You just know it. And I'm like, well, I don't like that's first of all, I don't even know what that is that you're describing. You just know something's wrong without any feelings or anything like that. Um, but Mike Winger did the same shit when I talked to him. Mike Winger refused to define, like, he was like, well, I think you're just being, you're trying to be difficult by asking me to define what intuition is. I'm like, no, I want to understand what you actually mean and what you say. But I don't know. That's what I feel happens a lot of these times with them. And hopefully it'll be different. I'm just hoping it goes through. I'd really like to have him on the channel. So we'll see what happens.
So interesting.
Remember with Mike Winger, I almost had to, I had to basically go on my, because he tried to cancel on me like 3 days before because he was afraid that Dr. Josh, he was so terrified of Dr. Josh Bowen. Like, he was so afraid. First, he didn't realize Dr. Josh was my co-host and was going to be there. So he made me make sure that Dr. Josh Bowen wouldn't stay in the room. So I couldn't have Dr. Josh in the room with us when we were having a conversation. He thought, he came up with this grand conspiracy how me and Josh were going to make him look bad. And I was just like, dude, what do you think this is? Like, how are we going to make you look bad? You're the one who controls the things that you say out of your mouth. Like, how about this? Don't say dumb shit and you probably won't look bad. Or at least just be thoughtful. Or if you don't know an answer, something, just say, I don't know. No one's going to judge you on that. So, I don't know, man. We'll have to see.
Have you ever had a one-on-one with Josh Brister?
I have. Way back in the day before Josh. Yeah.
Is that on your channel?
It is. Hold on. I'll put a link over here for it. I'll find it real quick. I'll put it up over here in the chat. I think it's actually under Josh Brister, I think. Conversation.
I have a Jones for some good old-fashioned Josh Brister.
Oh, he's a trip.
Yes.
Let's see, with Josh Brister. Yeah, it was a long time ago. 2 years ago, in fact, I had a conversation with him. So it was quite a bit ago, and he was really bad. He was really bad at that too. So.
Yeah, I had a debate with Josh Brister about a few months ago. It was a 2-on-2. It was with Andrew Strelidis, I think. I don't know if you know who that guy is.
Yes. How did that go?
Oh, they got wiped. I wiped them across the floor. Well, it was a 2-on-2, so I mean, it was pretty good.
Are you talking about the debate Danny had with Josh Brister?
Yeah. So
why are you talking?
Jesus, you guys.
I'm just playing it.
Sadly,
I put it under the promote yourself area of the Discord. So
cool.
I'm in the right spot, so you can check it out. Yeah.
I like diluting it down to it's just Danny and Josh Brister. There was nobody else.
Dude,
sadly, it wasn't even mostly Josh Brister. It was the other guy.
Yeah. So there's this interesting case that just happened. An IVF clinic, the in vitro fertilization clinic, they implanted the wrong embryos into a couple and then tried to lie about it and tried to cover it up. And the couple had the babies, and they were 2 Asian people, and they had I think it was 2 white babies. So they carried the babies to term and then had to give up the babies to their biological parents.
Oh, fuck.
Oh.
And apparently there was a recent case just like that, where that exact thing happened too. But the mom had complications with the giving birth, so she had to have a C-section. Even that had complications, almost lost her life, and she still had to give up the children.
That's sad.
Someone's getting sued.
Yeah, both of them sued. That's fucked.
So what's next, Skylar? What's on your plate?
What do I have next? I forgot. So I have someone from what's her name from Twitter. She's a PhD or something. Oh, what is her name? Something Brown or something like that. Rachel Fulton Brown, I think, is going to be on, I think, August 3rd. And then I have some kind of precept guy that Tom Jump debated recently will be coming on the channel, hopefully on the 16th.
Ayala, I think it's Ayala.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. That's him. He will be on the 16th if everything goes as planned.
A preceptor, that'll be interesting.
I actually enjoy the precept people. I find it like interesting, like as long as they're like not belligerent and just trying to control a conversation, which a lot of them are. But if they're like, if it's fun and they're willing to engage and actually help you understand what they're arguing, like I love precept arguments. I just don't like people like Darth Dawkins. Is he still making the rounds? Is that guy still around?
He is.
Oh,
I was
of
going to ask you if
course.
you've stayed abreast of him.
He's worse than ever.
Dude, look at Tom Rabbit's channel, man. I mean, like Tom's channel has like all the latest Darth Dawkins shit where he's like accusing liars of being morally or morally worse than like child molesters and shit. There's all kinds of just insanity on Tom's channel if you look at it.
This, of course, being prompted, I guess, by the whole Matt Bell thing.
Oh God, that was awful.
Well, he used to be friends with Matt Bell.
That was shocking.
It was beyond shocking.
Well, wait a minute. No, as far as I understood, they were never friends. I thought Matt Bell always thought Darth Dawkins was like a contester to his G+ most reasonable Christian title in the GDC.
Well, at the end, they were getting together in MK's hangout, destroying people.
Well, there's that one video where they go after each other. They're all going after each other. I think it's the one where Ernie's left in there alone. I think I was there, but I was unbroadcast.
There's one on DGH where Matt Bell goes for him and tells him what a useless person he is.
Yeah. There's a bunch of Christians all going after each other.
The reason the agent did A rather than B is because the agent did A rather than B.
That's a different bit.
You're wrong, Pogan.
It's the best video I've ever seen.
It's pretty funny.
The reason your argument is bad, Pogan, is because your
It's a bad argument, yeah. So now instead of just being stupid, he's stupid and a pedophile.
You're an ignoramus, Pogan. You're an ignoramus.
This fucking Jack Engstrike guy fucking riding his bike all through fucking New York.
Have you guys ever seen anybody really get owned, or Darth Dawkins actually get owned by anybody? Is he actually anybody that really ever got the best of him?
Me.
Have you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I used to be able to get him to hit his desk so hard you could hear the keyboard land.
One of them, it has like 4,000 views, but it's like a 25-minute conversation between me and Darth where I just try to get him to answer a question, and he eventually becomes so frustrated that he just leaves. And the whole time he's like screaming into his microphone, flipping out, and I don't really react to that.
Vic, I don't know, Skylar, I don't know if you're familiar with this guy named Vic or Godlyish, but there's like a 30-minute debate where, Darth Dawkins gets absolutely obliterated.
No, I don't know. Is it on Tom's channel? Where can I see?
Yeah, it's on Tom's channel. It's called Godlyish versus Darth Dawkins, and you should find it on Tom's channel.
Oh, we'll check.
Yeah, check out the one with Dr. Z also. That's pretty new.
Does anyone know what he looks like?
Yeah.
I would love to see a picture of what.
I tagged you in both videos in general chat, Skylar.
Are we live? I guess we're live on the internet right now. I think I didn't say anything too crazy.
Maybe he's a bodybuilder.
Huh?
50-pound bodybuilder.
There's plenty of pictures of him around, Skylar, if you do want to see what he looks like.
Yeah, I do. Someone should send me one. I've tried finding him. I want to see what this.
Well, someone will put it in the side chat here. Can one of you guys put his docs details in there?
Skylar, have you got any recordings of you talking to Matt?
Yeah, I got a really crazy one up. It's called "Slavery, Rape, and Matt Bell." That was from. This is what's crazy about it.
It's prophetic.
He was literally, and this is like 2 years ago. I'll put it up on the side. And it was about he was basically asking me all these rape hypothetical questions about whether I would rape somebody, and like one of them was if you like there was a situation where you know 1 million people were going to die in a nuclear bomb, and these terrorists had a woman, and if you rape the woman, the 10 million people wouldn't die, and like everything's legit. Like if definitely the 10 million people wouldn't die. Like this is the kind of scenarios this dude was asking me, and he kept going over all these rape scenarios with me. It's very bizarre, and within the context of current things, even creepier. So I'll see if I can get it for you guys, but
I think if I recall correctly in that
already.
conversation, you said, if I recall correctly in that conversation, you had said that even in the worst case scenario where everybody would die, if you had to do it, you still wouldn't do it, right?
Correct.
But like Matt Bell just has to get a little like sweaty, and he'll fucking do
it. He's willing to pay people to do it.
Skylar, who's in that video with you?
Got really mad.
There's a couple people in there.
So
yeah,
Coffee Smug posted it in general chat.
I think he's Scottish too.
And the thumbnail is some old guy.
It is. I need to change.
And I vaguely remember that guy.
Yeah, he was around. He used to drink quite a bit. He used to play Elite Dangerous. I think that was the game he used to like, or some space game. He's quite into his PC gaming as well.
How does the Uber bot? How did they figure this out? The little bots to post this video.
It searches YouTube.
What, it just recognizes what we're saying and then picks up it and then basically.
No, somebody typed it in.
Oh,
somebody typed in a YouTube search.
Okay.
.yt searches YouTube with keywords.
The singularity isn't upon us yet, just yet.
Apparently, and I'm so unhip with some of this technology. Yeah, I don't know what that dude's name is. Oh, look, what's his name? What is that dude?
Taser? What does that say on the screen there?
Taser, yeah. Therese?
So Skylar, we're going to be able to get a hold of the court documents when he's convicted, when the sentencing happens. Because apparently how it works in Scotland is it's quite transparent. And one of the guys he's in here now, you actually have to mail away for it, and they send it to you on paper. But yeah, so it's quite a big case in Scotland.
Is there any video or of anything of him being arrested or having to walk in the court or anything, stuff like that?
Nothing like that.
That's so crazy. It just it makes me wonder what he was doing online, right? Well, I mean, besides that stuff, but like with the great debate community. Like, was this some person that like had these inner demons, but actually believed in what he said with God and Christianity? Or was he just a sadistic fuck who just liked to mess with people by coming in and arguing about God and did these awful things? You know, like
we already had like we had this discussion whether or not like his convictions against or his like moral Christianity like preceded this these desires that he had towards kids, and he just got like seduced by just talking about it constantly, or if it was the other way around. And we sort of all decided, like, given the history and background that we have of Matt Bell, that he was just always just a piece of shit, and he like became a Christian because he just wanted to like find a way out of what he was feeling internally guilty about.
To me, explicitly, just say he was not a Christian. He just thought Christianity was true.
Wait, is that an MJ? What's up, dude?
Yo.
Yeah.
Haven't seen you in like 7 centuries.
We have iPads now, Apple products.
Yeah, he used to. Well, there was a time I remember, like, he explicitly refused to call himself a Christian. But there was a time when he was making the rounds in the Christian hangouts, saying things like, I believe in God, and I'm very sympathetic towards the Catholic position. That was, I'm very sympathetic towards like certain reformed, or reformists or whatever. Yeah, there was. I mean, he used to do that all the time in John's Hangouts and Gamblers Hangouts. He used to identify. He would say that like his theology most aligned with certain denominations, but would never himself identify as a Christian.
The only Christian hangouts I went to were MK's.
Is he still around? MK disappear again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he got in trouble.
His music career is on hold, sadly, I think.
Oh no. We'll never get to hear those dope beats.
He made some kind of satirical video where he was just like, if taken literally, he was just like endorsing rape and murder and things like that. But I think he was trying to like,
what?
It just backfired, and he got a message from YouTube administrators and things like that.
I do remember that. I remember hearing about that.
Did I miss that? Or are you talking about? I feel like I did something.
MK on God's Odds when he published his music there.
I mean, we're lucky to have the collection of we have.
It's only a matter of time before we figure out what MJ Demora's depravity is.
Oh, I heard my name.
Oh no.
MJ's like, I give too much to the poor. I owe people too much.
Skylar, have you heard any of MK's like new shit?
No.
Have you heard any of his music?
A little bit when he had that God's Odds channel up. Yeah, I listened to a little bit of it. It was such a weird album cover what they had put together. But it was pretty terrible what I remember of it.
Yeah, maybe somebody should play a little like Jesus is your friend.
So that's not God. Yeah, so God's Odds was the group he was with, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
The other three guys.
Yeah, more like a super group.
He as good a rapper as Robert Van Winkle?
Oh, probably way better. Yeah.
AKA Vanilla Ice.
Way better.
Robbie had talent.
Before he
you
was
guys gonna make me play it?
I wouldn't mind hearing a collaboration with MK and John. Actually, that'd be quite interesting.
Country.
That would be fascinating.
I think I've only heard the one God's Odds track. Got So Long to Go.
Oh, that's so good. So good.
It's odd.
30 AD. Jesus is your friend. That's the one I'm looking for right now. I don't know if anybody has it. So they can play it real short. Yeah.
There's one
that's
that
the best stuff.
There's one I really like.
It's on Joe's channel.
Called Whiff Waff. Anybody got that? It was only out for a couple of days.
Called what?
Whiff Waff.
Wick Whack.
Whiff.
Oh no.
With an F. Waff. With an F. It was only up a couple of days, but it's
Whiff Waff?
Whiff Waff.
Found it.
Oh, brilliant.
Really?
Wait, not that particular one, but found the 30 AD.
We're
gonna play here in just. I got you. I'm so sorry, dude. I got you all excited about it.
Jesus is your friend, not the government.
It's all right. It's gone down now.
Yeah.
Oh.
We've got some other musical people here too. I don't know if Skylar's. Skylar, of course, knows Shamos. I wonder if Skylar's.
Oh, has he heard the new Shamos?
Is Shamos doing music
wondering.
now?
Well,
in a way,
he's been a collaborator on at least one track.
Do you know who Chrissy Sweet is?
Maybe you remember Chrissy, Skylar?
Chrissy Sweet.
Chrissy.
It sounds familiar, but I don't remember.
Yeah.
There you go.
Listen to me. Listen very fucking closely. I can coerce anyone to have. Yeah. I can coerce anyone to have sex with me. Yeah. I can coerce anyone to have, yeah, I can coerce anyone to have sex. I can coerce anyone to have sex with me. Look, I can coerce anyone to have sex. I stick my dick in, and then I fucked her. I'm not cuffed like you little faggot. Bro, I don't care what you fucking say, okay? I really love the rape fantasy. Yeah. Let it wash over you. I can coerce anyone to have. Think about it. I can coerce anyone to have sex. I can coerce anyone to have sex with me. I can coerce anyone. Boom. I can coerce anyone to have. I can coerce anyone to have sex. I can coerce anyone to have sex with me. Yeah. Think about it.
Hey, Daddy. You want to spank my ass? You like to fill this pussy? Proceed. Make me your little bitch. You like that, don't you?
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Keep going. This is working.
Yeah, you hard. Go down on you. Just slaughter my mouth all over your cock. My dirty spit.
That's right, you little whore.
Yeah.
Keep going.
And then I let you rub my pussy. And then I let you ram me with your hard cock over and over again. Dirty little slut I am.
Yeah. I can coerce anyone to have. I can coerce anyone to have sex. I can coerce anyone to have sex with me. I can coerce anyone. Yeah. I can coerce anyone to have. I can coerce anyone to have sex. I can coerce anyone to have sex with me. Sex with me. Guys, let's hold on. Let's stop for a second. This isn't controversial, guys. If you go against me in this, God forbid Josh or Jack was here. It would just be slaughter fest. We just laugh at you fuckers. You do not have consent. I can just literally coerce anyone to have sex with me. Anyone.
So fucking good.
Oh my lord, who took the time to make that? That is incredible.
Penis tooth.
Yeah, I just posted a penis tooth webs. No, I guess I did not. Never mind.
What was the other voice
That
in
didn't
there?
work. Chrissy Sweet was the.
Chrissy Sweet. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember Chrissy now, Skylar?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't sound familiar. I may.
Chrissy, there's Chrissy.
Oh, there's yeah, that's right.
Chrissy is a trans.
Wait a minute.
Person.
You know her as Chris.
Her as a boy.
Yeah,
as
you know
Christopher.
Yeah, you remember her as Chris.
Yeah,
I
the
think
look I can tell. Yes.
Typically said Christopher, right? Or used to.
Yeah, the look I can tell by the look that I recognize.
Here, I
Hair
got you,
around a
bro.
little bit.
Check general. Here you're gonna remember. Oh no! Fucking Discord blocking messages, mostly accurate robo hamsters deemed to be explicit. What do you mean, Chrissy's not explicit? Fuck.
Is it the one where he? Oh, hold on.
There's some explicit ones.
Wait, post it and not safe for work.
Discord has been warned.
Chrissy kind of looks like Fiona from Shrek 2.
Oh. So what's up with Chrissy now? So what's the?
All right, check not safe for work, Skylar. There's the face you know and love.
I haven't seen her since Nadia Hangouts, honestly.
Chrissy hasn't been around for a while, right?
Yeah,
Months.
she hasn't been around.
I love how I just scroll through all this to get. Yes, I do remember that person. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Chrissy.
who that was.
Yeah,
that's who was in the. And that was something that that actually happened. That interaction between Shameless and Chrissy. You can actually hear that recording. I think that. Oh, maybe it's unlisted. I don't know.
See, I thought
it's unlisted.
See, I always thought Chrissy was like just doing it either to somebody else or to be funny, and then Penis spliced that in with Shameless reacting to somebody.
Nope.
I didn't realize it was an actual like event between the two of them.
There was a hangout many moons ago. It was like me, Molly, Nevin, Tom, a couple of other people, and Chrissy was in there, and she was doing a live show for everybody who was in Hangouts, but like on her, I guess Chatterbait or whatever website, and so like Tom had to filter it, and so he used like the Matrix like letters falling as a filter for the video stream, but you could totally still tell what she was doing by the motions that like you could vaguely make out in the filter, and like the sounds that were going on of her like choking on a dildo, and like all of a sudden Molly's like turns into a total dominatrix and is like, "That's right, you little whore." I'm like, Molly, what the fuck? What's going on here?
Yeah, that shit's weird.
I did not participate with that. But I remember when it happened.
So, Skylar, let's hear you defend atheism.
Before we do that, we're gonna have to define it.
That's what we'll begin with. I'd like let's preempt this conversation with you giving me your definition of atheism. Go ahead.
I don't know if I want to.
Do I scare you, sir? I'm just trying to get like inside of your head.
Skylar is an agnostic.
Yeah, not so tough without your own show and the mod power son, little Dr. Josh by your side. You're not so tough anymore, are you?
Look, I tune in every week and I see you bully Christian after Christian. I'm just asking you questions. If you're,
I mean,
why are you?
I'm happy to answer any
It's
questions.
a simple question. What's the definition of atheism?
I don't understand.
Are you actually honestly?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to be that aggressive with you, but I am interested in hearing why you hold the view that you hold.
Sure. I mean, I'll answer some questions. What question do you have first?
Yeah.
So if you're an agnostic,
we gotta define our terms first.
Right. So you're an agnostic, correct?
Sure. Generally, yeah. I don't. Here's what I'll say. I don't know if there's a God.
Okay. So do you?
Congratulations.
Do you have any arguments as to why common reasoning for the existence of God would be false, or do you just not think that any such argument exists?
I don't know. Is that a completely separate question to the first one? Because what I would say is like, I mean, I can answer it too, but I mean,
well, I
was
posing a dichotomy, right? Like,
yeah. Well,
so
I don't. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, I'm asking if you think it's the case that there are no compelling arguments for God, or you think the compelling arguments for God don't arrive at the conclusion that he exists with certainty.
I would think we'd have to define what we're talking about when we say God in that scenario. But if you're talking about just some kind of creator being that just create everything, like a deistic type God, I'm sure you might be able to throw some good arguments out there. Why not?
We can just use the common philosophical definition of God, right?
Which is?
What's that?
Omnipotent, omniscient, created existence, created the universe. You know, the Christian interpretation of what a monotheistic deity would be.
Sure. If we go with the Christian God, we can go with that. Then then I'm atheistic towards it. I do not believe he exists. I think his nature is contradictory.
So that's not actually. You're actually saying you're making the claim that the Christian interpretation of God is contradictory.
Sure.
Okay, and what's the argument for that claim?
He's morally contradictory.
In what way?
Well, let me ask you, are you Christian first before I even get into this?
Why would that matter?
I'm just interested to know. So that way I know what your beliefs are about Christianity and how I'm going to go about this. Because if you don't agree with Christianity, it's kind of like pointless. I'm just talking about a specific version of Christianity.
Ask him how he defines his atheism.
I'm just interested in you answering the question, right? I don't see what relevance my
Well,
view
sure.
has.
Then I need to know exactly. Okay, so the Christian God you're talking about is a Calvinist God, an Armenian kind of God? Do they believe in free will? Is there predetermination? What kind of attributes are you atoning to God or
We can
assigning to God?
all you need to account for are the properties that we just mutually agreed.
No, I don't agree
God
with that.
has.
I think that if you're gonna call it the Christian God, there are a lot more properties that go along with it, and those properties that go along with it make your God contradictory, or could the Christian God contradictory if it's not your God?
So, if I'm asking for an argument against the Christian interpretation of God, and then I give you a set of properties that God would have in all or most Christian sects, such as omnipotence, benevolence, omniscience, right? There shouldn't be a problem just accepting that definition of God for the purpose of a discussion, right? I don't think I need to give you a specific.
Sure, but I'm just going to say that's not the whole picture of the Christian God.
Well, it doesn't have to be, right? We can just use that definition for this discussion.
Sure. Do you connect morality to that God?
Well, I would assume that in most Christian interpretations of what God is, there are certain moral commandments that he makes that we're ordained to.
So what I would say is that Christians root a morality in God's nature. God says he loves people, but does horrible, awful things to them, including innocent children, babies, women. If you want particular scriptures, I can give that to you. But you can't say you love people, then at the same time treat them so cruelly, harshly, unjustifiably.
Wait, but that's not a contradiction.
Wait. Yeah, that's not a contradiction. God
Look,
could have more.
I could say I love the girl I saw on the subway 2 days ago and then brutally stab her to death. It doesn't change my love.
That's not love.
Look, you can fucking love your baby, but inject it with a needle that's like gonna prevent it from getting a disease, right? That doesn't mean you don't love your baby, retard.
Well, is that what we do? We just call me retard? Is that is this the level of discussion?
Look,
That's what you expect from her.
Don't listen to her. Look, I'm trying to be civil with you.
Yeah. No, I appreciate civil conversation. So, I mean, if you want to call that love, let's say taking a man's wife. Oh no, here, let's give it a simple one.
No.
God says no. Hold on, no. God says
I think
adultery
you're
is immoral. No, I'm talking about morality and the contradiction. I'm gonna give you a specific contradiction. So God says that it is immoral to have adultery, yet God forces women that are married to have sex with men out in open public.
We don't have access to God's. We don't have access to God's reasons.
Look, so you made the claim that the reason God cannot exist is because of a moral contradiction.
No, the Christian God, specifically.
That's what I mean. Yes.
Okay.
And then you said God's actions would be in contradiction with the claim that he loves humanity. He loves man, right? But just because he commits certain actions, for instance, violent actions, burns a town, corrupts a generation with disease, whatever he does, right?
Orders people. No, I give a specific
well,
one.
I'm almost done, right? Yeah.
Why aren't we just dealing with the thing I just addressed?
Well, the point I'm making is that no example you give like that is going to be contradictory with the claim that he loves man, because you don't have access to God's intentions.
Okay, so you're saying that God could love a human being and then force her. God could love a woman and then force her to sleep with other men in broad daylight in front of people. That's
right.
That
well,
could be
the only way you're going to be able to establish a moral contradiction.
That's a question. Could he love a baby and then have it executed?
I'm answering no and explaining why, right?
Okay.
The only way you're going to be able to establish a contradiction is if you have access to God's intentions, right? Unless you have access.
It doesn't matter in this particular situation. I'm sorry. I asked you directly. Can God say that he loves the baby?
No.
So no. So then you agree with me. Then he can't. Then it's a contradiction that he doesn't love a baby.
No, that's not what I agreed to.
That.
Look again.
God might have morally sufficient reasons for doing these, and we just don't know what they are.
What would be a morally sufficient reason to execute a baby?
The baby grows up to be
baby was a gay nigga.
We don't know what they are.
Look,
we have limited, fallible, finite minds. We don't know what an omnipotent, what moral,
You're
maximizing.
Really great at this.
Maximizing
You're fantastic at talking.
I would just look. The point is just to say, because you don't have access to God's intentions, you can't make a claim like that, right? Because it could be the case that God kills a 3-month-old baby because he knows that the baby will grow up to be the second Hitler or something like that.
But that's not how Christianity works, though.
Why not?
Because it's not what he does.
How?
Where in the Bible does he kill somebody to protect the future?
Wait, but you're making the
also, Pogan, that is like saying that he didn't put forth the circumstances in the first place. You're saying he's killing the baby to stop Hitler, but he would have just made sure the baby was never born in the first place.
And remember too, the thing about adultery. The
essentially-
adultery is a direct commandment. Do not commit adultery. And
Wait, but I'm not seeing how this is a contradiction though.
because God's moral character, all of God's moral laws come from his character, right? So the reason why it's a sin to lie is because God is not a liar. So when you look at something like adultery, you can't say that God, like, he contradicts himself. He says not to have adultery, then he forces people to have adultery.
Do you
He
think
might
God?
have morally sufficient reasons for doing so.
So
what I was
God can
gonna
go
ask.
against his own very nature, is what you're saying then. God can commit.
What are
God
you
can
talking
command
about?
people
You
to
just-
commit immoral
Yeah,
actions.
well, you made something up, first of all, right? I mean, I've heard apologists say it before, but it's not at all clear that that's like what we should take it to mean, that you shouldn't lie because God is not a liar. You just made that up, right? There's no exegesis. That's all eisegesis there. You're not like
This was the
reading that
important
out
part
of
at the
text.
beginning that I told you that this is going to be pointless if you don't hold that specific view of Christianity.
Wait, but even if we do, you still haven't established a moral contradiction.
Sure, then let's keep going with this. I can keep going, but the problem is other people keep jumping in, and I'm losing track.
I don't have control over what other.
No, I'm not blaming you for what that's happening.
I'm wondering what a moral contradiction would look like if that's not it.
Well, I'm not making the claim that there are moral contradictions. I'm just saying that I take a moral contradiction to mean there are two moral propositions, right? One is true, the other is false, and they would be directly contradictory because they deal with the same issue, right? For instance, Proposition 1, killing is right, Proposition 2, killing is wrong. Obviously, that's a moral contradiction. But the example you gave where God claims to love humanity, but
the adultery. Stick with the adultery. I mean, that's a much clearer example.
Look, you don't really need to interrupt me, right?
The thing is, but I've said the adultery thing 3 times, and you keep going back to the first thing with love.
Sure. So the fact that we'll go with the adultery since you insist. The fact that God could have morally sufficient reasons to facilitate something like that means that it's not going to be out of accord with his love for humanity necessarily to do that, which means no contradiction would be possible.
Can God commit immoral actions?
It would depend on what you mean by immoral.
To his own standard.
Look, if you think it's rooted in God's nature, right, morality.
I'm asking you. You're the one arguing from the God position here, so I need to know what you.
Can I answer your question without?
Well, I know, but the thing is, you're kind of going. Well, the thing is,
no.
I don't know what your position is.
The answer is no. Don't listen to this dumbass. The answer is no.
Like, if you answer directly and you deal with, if I actually know your position, it'd be easier. But the problem is, you're trying to argue from from my perspective, like 5 different positions here.
Yeah, I'm saying the answer is no. God can't do anything wrong. That's the answer.
That's exactly right. So then, if God says it's wrong to commit adultery, how can God force people to commit adultery? He would be going against his own nature.
Well, his nature, do you think his nature is fixed? Do you think he can have morally sufficient reasons to do an action that he previously didn't do?
I think it's all imaginary.
That's what Christians say, that God is unchanging.
Yeah, I'm just going by the Christian responses. This is exactly right. And this is what the point, like, I'm going by what a Christian would say to me.
I'm asking you, though.
Well, no, I don't believe in Christianity. I think it's all bullshit.
So let's say God.
I think you could
makes
take
a
anything
statement.
from the Bible and make an argument from it.
Sure.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Yeah.
God makes a statement at one point and does something that we construe to be moral because it's in his nature to do it.
Mhm.
And then later, given your example, for instance, he facilitates adultery or compels people to commit adultery, whatever, right? That's obviously going to be in his nature because he's now done it, right? So what's the moral contradiction there?
No, that he couldn't do it. And if he did do it, it would be a contradiction.
Do you not think it's logically possible for him to change his mind?
It's not. It's rooted in his nature, not his mind.
That's not the question I asked you.
Well, the problem is it doesn't relate to what we're talking about. That doesn't relate to the Christian God. It's not his mind that makes something right or wrong. It's his nature.
I think this is kind of a pointless discussion without somebody taking a specific Christian
I
view.
agree too, and this is the frustrating.
Look. If he's omnipotent,
Like Pogan,
right,
this is really done. Unless you take a specific position, right now all you're doing is just talking about. You're taking a shit ton of other positions, just trying to keep switching back and forth on.
Yeah, Pogan is.
You're also well. The other problem too is the objection. Well, I see the reasoning you were going down. Like you jumped on the first horn of the Euthyphro dilemma, right? So like anything that
Euthyphro?
God can change. Euthyphro dilemma, yeah.
Euthyphro?
He can change his Euthyphro. Yes. What the fuck?
I'm sorry.
Go fuck yourself.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, eat shit.
I forgot what I was going to say. You son of a bitch!
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you know how Y can sometimes take a long E sound? That's the only reason Jovan was commenting. It's pronounced Euthyphro.
You said that he's taking the first horn of the Euthyphro. Well, my...
Non sequitur.
I said Euthyphro.
Right. So the claim was that there was a moral. Oh, he's not even in the room. Oh.
You ran him out, Pogan. Thanks a lot.
No, he's in Blue Politics congregation for some reason.
Somebody, what?
I don't know. Did he get moved?
Somebody move him up.
Did you accidentally move yourself down there?
Yeah, I think I hit on.
I was just gonna point out that, like, regardless of whether or not you think right, regardless of whether or not you think I'm shifting between different interpretations of theism or Christianity, the burden was to establish a moral contradiction, and that's just going to boil down, unless you disagree, to two contradictory propositions. But you haven't given those contradictory propositions.
I did. He tells you not to commit adultery, and then he forces someone to commit adultery.
No, but look, what you said was that he does things that
was my first point. I went in and receded that point, gave that point away, and went to my second.
So you're not holding to that anymore.
Well, I'd have to think about it a little bit more, but I think this is just simpler to get to your point quicker.
Okay, well,
I'm going to use this example.
Well, that's not that hard, Pogan. What he's saying is that he contradicts his own nature and virtue of commands that he gives, and it's exactly right.
No, that's the confusion, right? I was simply operating on the claim you made at first that he does things that we construe to be harmful despite saying he loves us, right? But if you just mean God changes what he does despite once saying or doing something that was in direct contradiction with what he's now doing, for instance, the adultery example you gave, right? That's more understandable. I'm not going to object to that.
No, look, if you take, like, I understand what he's saying, like, it makes sense, right, from a Calvinist perspective. He's saying, for example, God would say something like, do not commit murder, right? Or do not do X. But if you take the Calvinist conception, for example, right, he's in contradictory to his own nature because ultimately he's in control of everything. So the murderer only commits murder or only commits rape in virtue of him having control of that person's heart.
Right, that's fine. I'm just pointing out that he's apparently retracting the first claim, which is what I was responding to.
Well, here's the thing, right? So either God has a very different definition of love than we as humans have, or it's completely meaningless in the Bible. Because how God is described as loving, remember, that's part of his being too, is that he is love. There's nothing that connects with a loving God when you read scripture, specifically the Old Testament.
Well, I agree intuitively that, like, firebombing a village with or cursing an entire generation is gonna intuitively seem like it's in violation of somebody saying they love humanity. But the point is just to say that presumably he can have morally sufficient reasons to do those things while still, quote unquote, loving humanity, and that wouldn't be a contradiction.
No,
that's why I also
that's why argument in the world though saying he's morally
just one more thing, right? I also conceded that if you change it to a contradiction just being him saying one thing but then doing the opposite, right? That's clearly a contradiction. I don't have an objection to that.
But the thing that you could say is that the claim is not that God loves everyone, right? There's no claim that God loves everyone. So bringing up the fact that God firebombs a village is irrelevant to the claim that he's contradictory, because you could just clearly say, well, clearly God did not love those people, right? He doesn't. There's no imperative that says that God absolutely loves everyone, contrary to popular Christian belief.
I mean, it does say God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son.
Wait,
I know
that's a little bit more general. I mean, it could be taken.
Yeah, but the idea is not that God loves every single person in the world. So he loves the world in a general way, right? So there is, in Christian theology, and I'm sure you know this, right? You've got like you got this sort of passive and worldly love that he has, in that even though there are some that he knows will go to hell in the Calvinist conception, he sends to hell, he still allows them to have like good food to eat, some of them good food to eat, and to enjoy the sunlight. So in that sense, there's a general type of love that he gives, even those that he will ultimately send to judgment. But the salvific sort of love that's being talked about in John 3:16 is not specifically for everyone.
Would you agree also that you would have to say that, like, we would have to, by reading the Bible, say that God doesn't love children or babies or particular children and babies with that
Yes,
kind of argument?
absolutely. That's biblical.
Yeah, under a Calvinistic, yeah.
It's funny because there's two parts where God actually like contradicts himself in a way. It's not really a direct contradiction, but it's funny the words he put. Because at one point he says like, "I love those who love me." Then he also says, "For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have?"
Right.
So that's in a different book.
No, yeah, right. That's not in contention, right? We've established that under the view that Skylar and I mutually agreed to, right? The view of God, at least. There are going to be direct contradictions so long as we root morality in God's nature, right? What I would still challenge is the notion that some violent action like that, or some presumably abhorrent thing he does, is going to be in contradiction with the claim that he loves humanity. And if Declan is saying it's not actually biblical that he loves humanity simpliciter, right? He doesn't love everyone, period, right? That's something that it would be interesting, and I would probably say then it wouldn't be, I mean, it still wouldn't be a contradiction, right? It would just become irrelevant to say,
well, look, well, let's take, for example, I actually want to attack the stronger claim, right?
Sure.
Let's take, for example, you might say there are morally sufficient reasons for X, right? Well, I'm just going to come back and say, well, you could have morally sufficient reasons for doing X and still not love that person. Let me give you an example. On the face of it, it seems like any situation in which Yahweh would command bears to go down and maul children to death while they are alive is not an action that is consistent with him loving those children, right? And it just so happens that we have an example of this in Scripture. So it seems that those actions implicitly implies that God doesn't love them, given the ferociousness and the violence of the act that God commanded upon those children. Why? Because we could say at least one thing is apparent or is encompassed or is entailed in love, which would be that you wouldn't allow or command that such violent acts be done against
that's not
children. Do what?
That's not entailed, because I can see like it's all relative, right? You could value their experience of being what's it called, corrected on their behavior
if that was the statement,
as a parent.
Right. If that was stated, right, I think you would be justified in saying that's a possible explanation. But what we see in that situation is that it said it was because they did X, i.e., a punishment. And that was making fun of a prophet because he was bald.
Right, just like you'd punish your child by slapping them on the hand or something.
Yeah, but that doesn't...
It's not equivalent.
Why?
You think that slapping a child on the hand and commanding a group of bears to maul a child is equivalent?
Well, just all relative, right? Because like God might not see that as like this big harm. I mean, he's
you have
eternal.
evidence to suggest that?
Well, the point is there's no entailment there. That
no, I think there is.
Look, the point.
Well, you'd have to show that God, like, it's not. You'd have to show the contradiction with
so you could
commanding those things, but you're not going to show the contradiction by saying there is a contradiction.
That's the claim that is being made, right? There are contradictory actions he does all the time, and by that we just mean he contradicts his own nature. That's fine. But to say that there's a contradiction with him loving people, but then also correcting them, as it was put, right? I don't see how that's a contradiction. I don't see what the contradictory propositions would be there.
It's not correcting somebody when you execute a baby. Like, it's just not. And
right,
the thing is, like, if I follow the definition of love from the Bible,
but again, that's just going to be relative.
Patient.
Yeah, you can correct somebody by murdering a baby.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I'm following the definition that the Bible gives for love. And it says love is kind, love is gentle, love is patient. And the way that God treats people is not kind, gentle, or patient.
That's
so
exactly
it's
right.
bare minimum just not accurate. Even
well,
if it's not a
patient, kind, it's all relative terms.
No, look.
God could have been very patient with all the time.
Yeah, and in that
I don't
moment,
know how you would define kind as
hold on. In that moment in which he was patient, he might have been loving. But the point is that the action in which God pulled the trigger was not a loving act, right? It's not a loving act, and it's not indicative of loving. It's actually indicative of the opposite.
Right, that's the claim.
Scripture, well, what I'm saying is that according to Scripture, You want to talk about who's loving and what entails loving. Scripture gives you what an outline for loving is, and that act does not fulfill the criteria.
Exactly.
You're saying it contradicts the criteria?
Yes, absolutely.
What's the criteria?
Being patient, being loving, being kind.
Yeah, break that down and tell me how there's a contradiction.
Commanding bears to maul children is not indicative of being patient. It's not indicative.
Indicative is irrelevant. That's just talking about it, like attendance.
No, actually,
we're talking about necessary.
No, it's
we're
not
talking
irrelevant because we're talking about what's implied. It's something that's indicative is implicit.
No, indicative is like.
But you can turn that gun back around on yourself and say, yeah, then sure, then it's all subjective, and then you're faced with the idea that what is good is arbitrary.
No, that's not
what is loving is arbitrary.
Well, the point would just be to say that because they're trying to say that there's a moral contradiction with God's claim of love, if they can't establish a contradiction by God's lights, right, or they can't establish a contradiction referencing some fixed criteria within the Bible, right? It just seems like what is love, what is kindness, what is patience is going to be relative. And if it's relative, obviously, you're not going to be able to produce a deductive contradiction because there wouldn't be contradictory propositions. You know, I sent bears to maul a camp of children as a proposition, or however you want to put it, is not in direct contradiction with I love the children.
Sure. How could you say that it's kind to harm children?
Well, because again, those terms are going to be relative.
Oh, well, give me an example.
I can give you an example of me being harmed.
Give me an exact example of how it could be kind for God to send a bear to maul children.
Well, again, it's going to be relative, right?
Oh, just give me one.
If God feels that he's been more than patient with the children and that a necessary corrective action is to send bears to maul them, right? It doesn't mean that he's now in contradiction with his claim that he loved them.
So you're saying that God could still love a child and yet have a bear maul him to death?
I'm saying a contradiction hasn't been established.
Yeah, I think you're reaching, is what I think. I think that's just pure reaching. Like you're taking words and defining them in ways that we don't use them. We would never use love in that context. You would never use kindness in that context. And for some reason, I'm not saying you're the Christian, but I'm just saying Christians would just basically you rework the English language to fit your narrative.
Well,
and that's exactly what's happening here.
We normally wouldn't use them that way, but there's no contradiction with using it that way.
Right.
It's still applied. The point,
there is a contradiction. You cannot say you love a baby and then say you're going to execute.
You just keep
especially when you have the ability
that's the
to
claim,
make sure.
Right? Look,
no,
again,
especially when you have the ability to make sure that baby's never even born. If you don't want the baby to live, you didn't have to make it born.
Look,
there's all these different options that
but,
go
look,
with it.
I'm gonna show you a contradiction and then something real quick.
I understand what a contradiction is.
A bachelor is a married man. Do you see the contradiction?
Yes.
The contradiction
just like you would say,
is
just like saying killing children and you loving them is a contradiction.
Right, but you wouldn't explain the contradiction by just saying there's a contradiction.
It's not love.
Right?
It's not love.
You wouldn't explain the contradiction.
Well, it could be a contradiction.
You'd explain the contradiction by defining what
I heard you
a
5
bachelor.
times, dude. You don't have to repeat yourself.
I haven't finished yet. Go ahead.
Look, Jovan, can you show a moral?
No, hang on, no. I don't want to. No. I don't want to move on from this. Okay, so what Jovan was going to say was that the contradiction isn't merely analytic, right? What you're talking about is some sort of like a meaning that's performative, right? What it means to be loving is to do this, that, or the other thing.
Well, it could be
but
analytic, couldn't it? Because
yeah, that's what I was getting. I was saying that it is an analytical.
It is
what
analytic.
they're saying is an analytical.
First of all, you guys haven't even. What do you define love? If you're saying it's not a contradiction, then define it.
Oh God! Look, I just want to quickly point out before we get into
that's the whole crux of the issue.
Yeah, I used the biblical definition.
Yeah, they defined it as
it
polite, loving, polite, kind, and patient.
Yeah, what's a moral
how God
contradiction?
defines it.
Right. Then I can just say, guys, hey, guess what, Jovan? A bachelor's not an unmarried male.
Do what?
We're welcome.
That was what I was trying to get at.
Of Christianity. We're doing an internal critique of Christianity.
I don't understand what that was meant to say, though.
Who knows?
I mean,
yeah,
this
come up
whole
with a
thing
moral
just
contradiction.
reeks of dishonesty, to be honest with you. Like, as a side note. It seems to me that just intuitively everyone in here knows, or at least believes, with the position that commanding bears to go maul children is not a fucking loving act.
Exactly.
I mean,
I don't like think it is myself. I don't see a
So what would a moral contradiction look like?
Look, you're right, Declan, right? I intuitively don't think that it's loving to have a group of children killed by bears, right? But what I'm objecting to is the claim that there was a contradiction, and we just simply don't have contradictory propositions.
How have you not seen this?
It's
well,
a contradiction.
I don't understand. Like, look, so very plainly, the criterion for love, right, which was outlined in Scripture, was given, right? And there are certain stipulations given. And it seems that the contradiction is in the act itself. It is contradicting that criterion. Like, I don't see in any way how commanding a group of bears mauling a child is kind. I don't see how it is patient. I don't see how it's any of those criterion.
Right, but we pointed out that your interpretation of those terms is not necessarily going to be in accord with God's, right? The terms are relative.
Okay, hold on a second. All right, so if that's the case, what do you think God means when he says what Scripture says, or what Scripture means rather?
Yeah, I'm not touching any of that.
Well, that's exactly right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right, you don't want to touch any of
No,
that.
I'm not touching what Pogan said is the thing.
Look, I don't claim to have access to God's intentions, right?
Okay, look,
I'm just saying there's no
useless argument.
contradiction.
This is just a useless argument. If you're just going to say, well, God can mean by this word, okay, great. Then we'll never know what God's intentions or words are.
The reason why I didn't want to do that was because I was just saying, look, when you guys say there's a contradiction, you haven't shown any contradiction. That's my point in bringing up the Bachelor. Hold on. That's my point in bringing up the Bachelor thing. When you bring up the contradiction in Bachelor, it's clear. We show the contradiction by pointing out, just by defining the two terms, and then saying this contradicts this.
They define
you guys
love.
Are saying,
they define love, though, Joe.
But what you guys are saying is this just contradicts. But you're not explaining how it contradicts. You're not explaining. Right. You're just saying that love. Well, you being polite contradicts sending. Well, you being kind or you being patient contradicts sending a bear. How does it contradict sending a bear?
Okay, is this
because you can think of a possible world?
Let me break this down.
You can think of a possible world where sending a bear.
Okay,
there was a.
All right, no, I'll do it. I can't believe I'm having to fucking do this, but okay.
Use more relative terms.
Fine. Okay, there is body language that is consistent, right, with being loving. Those acts may be something categorized such as embracing someone, right, showing affection. That sort of deal. Violence, however, is contradictory in that it not only does not show those things,
relative,
but it's meant to. Okay, you know what, JJ, just fucking go ahead. Jesus fucking Christ.
JJ,
let him finish. I can already defeat that.
Why doesn't Pogan just
we can think of a
example of a moral contradiction?
Declan, you think that like corporal?
Wait, I
create all the definitions for words.
Oh my God! I guess never mind. I'll just shut up since everybody else wants to talk.
There's a lot of people talking.
Please. Jovan, go.
Declan, I'm sure that you can think of a situation in which loving could involve like a slap on the wrist to a child to stop them from touching a heat or stop them from touching an oven or something, right? You just said any violence is not loving when that is violence.
Grow up. I'm using violence in this context, right?
You need to be the one that grow up if you can't even handle hypothetical.
Because we're talking about two different contexts.
Like you sound like those people on the internet that told you that get upset at you for bringing in Hitler as a hypothetical.
What you're doing is you're taking slapping a child's hand is the same as executing them, and it's such.
When did I say that?
Because that's basically what your argument is, boy. Well, we don't know what he really meant by love.
You're acting like
loving.
A child
It could
right
be
now,
loving to sit there and have children.
You're doing what the Christians do.
It could be loving when you. No, I'm actually doing what I do to Christians to you right now because you're not being reasonable and logical. You're basically taking words from the Bible saying they don't mean what they mean, and then you're arguing against this, and you don't know what they meant. Like we do have scholars, we do have stuff where we can study ancient languages and we can look at the intent of the author and if we're taking a step into the Christian worldview, we can go by that. But what you're doing is just silly town at this point.
Yeah, but none of that establishes an analytic contradiction.
I already gave you a contradiction and you agreed to it, and that God says that don't commit.
I don't know why you said
any
yeah
forces
there,
people.
Contralytic analydiction.
So God tells you not to commit adultery. God forced people.
No. That's not the. But that's not the claim, right? The claim
is the contradiction.
No, the claim was that because you initially said you rescinded your claim and then you jumped back into it, right? What we're talking about is whether or not the claim that God loves people is going to be in contradiction with some of his actions, such as mauling, sending bears to maul kids.
Yes, we have a definition of love, and you can't say that it's those actions if we follow the definition of love that's given by the Bible.
Right, but
you have a contradiction of terms.
Again, you haven't established a contradiction.
Okay, love is kind, love is patient, love is gentle. That's the biblical definition. Is it kind to execute a child?
I don't have access
gentle
to
to
God's
execute.
intentions.
Okay, so then you don't have an argument. This is a pointless argument then.
Pogan, does anything contradict kindness? Pogan, does anything contradict
That's
kindness?
actually a good question.
It's going to depend on what the terms mean according to God. That's why we said they were
well,
relevant.
you figure out what words mean, Pogan, and come back.
Well, then you can't say that it's not a contradiction because even you don't know what it means.
I'm not making the claim that it isn't. I'm asking.
Yes, you are.
Why
Pogan
it's
is asking for the definition of kind, and then to show how that definition contradicts the definition.
I don't know why I have to repeat.
Love.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jovan. Go ahead.
It shows how that contradicts, how that definition contradicts sending a child to his death by bear or something.
Correct,
like
because
that's all he's asking, and that's not an unreasonable claim.
This is like this is the common exercise in philosophy seminars with lifeboat scenarios, like the trolley problem.
Yes,
like it's like you can always just
like for you guys to be upset about this is insane.
Scenario. Yeah, so you can always appeal to like I can give you a hypothetical where it would be like kind to slap a child on the wrist if on a consequentialist view that like my slapping them on the wrist prevents them from running into the street and getting knocked over by a car and dying, right?
Yeah, but if you're doing an internal critique of the Christian worldview, it's not a consequentialist morality system.
Right. We're doing an internal critique.
And also what Schuyler did when he said that, well, you're just equating slapping a child's wrist with murdering them by bear. That's insane. That's what the Christians do. No. Or like the random. Hold on. That's like what they do when you say something like, well, it's not wrong for that person to do that because they were listening to their orders. Like a soldier's killing a child or something, right? It's like it wasn't wrong for him to do that because you were just listening to his orders. Then we say something like, well, the Nazis were just listening to their orders, right? Bringing the principle, the hypothetical into the situation. Was it okay for them to do it because they were following orders? And then you said, what, killing a soldier doing his job is the same as Nazis? Oh my God. That's exactly what Schuyler did.
No.
That's literally exactly what he did.
The reason why it's being stated is because you respond, and you just did it when I say something like, you think a person who's commanding bears to maul a child is equivalent with love, and then you respond with, yeah, I think there are situations in which
equivalent
you can slap
with
a child,
love.
you can slap a child on the wrist, and then blah 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 blah. In other words, your response shows that you're trying to put that in the same category. Right?
You just completely misinterpreted.
There's something that is specifically violent, that is specifically unnecessary about commanding bears to maul children. That puts it on in a different category than slapping children on the wrist for taking a cookie out of the cookie jar.
Jovan,
I don't think he's saying it's equivalent. Like I might have disconnected. I don't think that Jovan is saying that it's equivalent. What's happening is just that he's saying that there's like some level of suffering that would be acceptable for some level of reward or like positive outcome. And what you could say with the theist, and most often does, and I think wrongfully so because it leads to other fallacious views, but the theist could say like, look, children being mauled by bears, certainly intuitively it seems bad, but had you had the perspective of omniscience to know that like maybe there's only one other choice, right? That like they, instead of being mauled by bears, they were like burned alive or something like that, or some worse thing, right? And that God was selecting for the most merciful of these paths, right? That doesn't seem logically contradictory.
No, what I'm saying is that absent of any sort of information that could be construed as justification, right? It seems that on the face of it, we are left with a contradiction, right? In that God says, "Hey, look, I'm loving," and what I mean by this is love is kind, patient, affectionate, all of this criterion, right? And we look at actions that are not that, such as specifically atrocious actions like commanding bears to maul a child, and we say, isn't that contradictory to what we see when God says that he's loving? Right? But if we say that, then people are coming back saying, oh, well, you haven't shown a contradiction. And then we get down in the weeds and say, oh, well, look, God says when he's loving, he's kind, patient, joyful, all of these things, right? Which seem to be behaviors or emotions that convey actions that are contradictory, right? And then you say, well, we can't do that because that's relative.
We don't know what the original intent of the words were, basically, in the Bible. Like it's such nonsense, so many levels. I mean, this is a God who basically is going to force people to eat their own children through cannibalism, because of the curses that he's going to put on them. But yet, that's kind, gentle, loving. Like, this is just laughable.
Jovan, what would be an immoral act? What could you possibly even point to say, okay, the bear's thing maybe, but this is fucked up.
That's right.
Nothing.
I mean, under this sort of criterion, you couldn't
Wait, hold on. What did he say?
Of course.
What did you say, Jovan?
Sorry, I didn't understand the point of it. Of what you said.
What he said or what I said?
Like, are you asking a immoral act under my system or under the Christian system?
Under the Christian system.
You're going to have to ask them specifically. It's going to be something like out of accord with God's nature, or if it's divine command, it's just going to depend on the specific Christian's view.
I don't know how you could have a standard for not good if everything happens according to God's will and that everything is evidence for God, an unfalsifiable hypothesis of an immaterial thing having a physical effect on the world, right? You can't distinguish. The Christian has no grounds for making moral judgments, right? They want to appeal to an objective standard, but the problem is they themselves can't make moral judgments because they would have to be forced to say, and as Skylar has said time and time again, Christians are always 3 fucking questions away from defending child rape. Always. They have to say it's good. And otherwise, they're just fucking contradicting themselves. If we go back to the Euthyphro dilemma. Euthyphro, Jovan.
That is not
how but the child rape isn't under Jovan's view, child rape isn't an immoral act.
That's not under my view.
Well, you could just say that God has reasons. That's what you were proposing.
You said under my view.
Under the view
he
that
was arguing for the Christian's view.
I wasn't even arguing for that. I literally just said, look, you guys didn't point to a contradiction.
I wasn't arguing for the Christian view either, right? I was just pointing out that no
like Jesus Christ, people.
Just whatever you want to say, the position that you were defending. Okay, does it matter?
I weren't defending any position. I said, look, you guys didn't point to a contradiction. You guys said there was a contradiction, and you're only making the claim.
You're defending the position that the sending bears to maul people is unloving.
What? No.
All right, I don't know. I'm done interacting with Jovan. I don't know. He's like got the JJ syndrome or something today. I'm done.
Dude, I was not defending that position. You're just wrong.
That's low.
The problem is not my fault that you're wrong.
Jovan, you are defending the position that it's not a contradiction.
All I said was like, you guys have not shown that it's a contradiction. Maybe you can say I'm defending the position that you guys have not shown that. But that has nothing to do with the Christian position or not something being immoral. What Tom kept saying that I said something was immoral under my position, it's immoral or something like that. That had nothing to do with what I was saying.
So, what would be a moral contradiction?
Look, the fact that I don't think a moral contradiction has been established doesn't mean I'm defending Christianity, right?
Do you think that there are moral contradictions?
What?
Do you think that there are moral contradictions?
I don't know. I'm only speaking with reference to this.
I don't know.
You don't know, so okay.
I mean, on the face of it, I mean, I have to be honest here. It seems like I'll say it again, like there's a certain level of dishonesty, right?
Yeah.
Like if people want to go down in the weeds and be like, well, we don't really know what kindness and affection means according to Christian theology. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like you can at least glean from what you read to sort of understand what is meant by that under the Christian worldview, right? Like I don't get this. I just don't.
Yeah, but the objective position, I agree. I think they're defining it in such a way, right, that it is the case that like being mauled by bears or sending bears to maul little kids is not affectionate. Then boom. I mean, that's all you have. That's all you need to work with in terms of having a discussion with these people. BEWM. Boom. Youthifro. God, I hate all of you.
Youthifro.
It just is.
I mean, mauling is by definition not gentle, man.
I think the problem is the issue is the people who are arguing against what me is it and the other dude was saying was they don't know Christianity. And if like we're arguing, if we're doing,
you just keep.
Well, the one doesn't even know if there are moral contradictions. He said he doesn't know if there are moral contradictions. So I don't know why.
Well, and here's the thing: like, I'm not knocking you. You admitted yourself that you should read the Bible or ask a Christian about these things, but you're arguing Christian positions against us. To say, like when we brought up the arguments for why it's morally contradiction. Well, God could mean something. Well, if you don't know what God meant by these words, or you don't know about Christianity, you probably shouldn't make these arguments because it doesn't work well for you.
Well, I for one never said I didn't know anything about Christianity, and
So tell me what makes something moral or immoral under Christianity.
It depends on whether or not you're a divine command theorist, or what. It all depends on your specific view of Christianity. There's not one.
We'll say traditional Christianity. We'll say traditional where they think it's rooted in this nature.
A pop quiz with you, Charlotte.
No, I'm just asking. It's not a pop quiz. I'm not asking you how many books are in the Bible or what was the name of this person.
Wait, why does this
questions about Christianity to test or judge how much knowledge I have?
We're specifically talking about morality, and I'm trying to understand if you even understand the Christian concept of morality. And so far, it doesn't seem like you do, or you wouldn't have said the things that you've said so far. So you don't have to answer me. That's fine.
Yeah, eat shit, Jovan.
Michael, do you see me trolling at all during this?
No.
Apparently, people think I'm trolling.
I don't think you're trolling, to be frank with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you're trolling either. I think you were just like, look, establish. And I mean, you brought it up, right? Like, all they'd have to do is just say, it is analytically the case that like being mauled by bears is, not good. On my view.
You all need Jesus in your life.
No, thanks.
It's analytically true. The mauling babies is bad on God's view or something. Is that the idea?
That's what
hey, Skylar, have you met Kathleen?
Yeah, I think she's been on my show before.
Have you heard Kathleen's sermon she gave?
Oh God, no, not that. No, fuck no, not play that.
Well, Skylar's been directed
no responsibility
to
that.
Skylar has been directed to Penis Tooth's channel. There's some other great pieces you can find.
Actually, the sermon is pretty great.
The sermon is pretty great.
Well, so there's some background. Why don't you provide your like brief summary of the God is argument, Kathleen? Don't please don't go into it deep, but just tell them like what the God is argument is. For Skylar,
Our
and then we'll play
morality is based on God's nature. God is not a moral agent, so we can't make moral evaluations against God. Boom. Simply.
Boom.
God's not a moral agent at all? That's what you're saying?
No.
Does he have any type of morality?
Not that we can infer directly, no.
But you would say you don't know if he has a moral system of his own.
No, not that we can infer directly. We can infer our own morality from God's nature, but we cannot make moral evaluations against God's actions because he's not a moral agent to us. He's just merely authorized in his action.
Maybe I don't understand that part. So how do we get morality from God's nature? Is that what you're saying to me?
Yeah, so if we take the Bible, right?
Yeah.
It's a Christian word. There's parts in the Bible where God has revealed his nature. Some of them have been brought up.
Which parts?
So like,
The
benevolent,
ones that you pick and
just,
choose, or just because I know you're one of the pick and choose Christians that just pick and choose what they like from the Bible. So which morality are you going to refer to as the good stuff? The Jesus happy-go-lucky stuff?
Well, I hold that the morality comes from the ethical decalogue.
Okay, explain that a little bit more.
What most people would mistakenly refer to as the Ten Commandments.
The 10 Commandments. Okay. So that's where morality comes from.
Correct.
How does it come from there?
Those are the prescriptions that God has given us how to live our lives.
And God doesn't have to live up to those own standards?
Not at all.
But it's part of his being.
It's his command to us. This is
okay, yeah, but you said morality is rooted in his nature. A command isn't necessarily his nature.
We root our
Okay,
morality.
I don't know
in his
what's the
nature.
difference there. How would it be any different if whether it's rooted in his own nature or we root it in his nature? Is it in his nature, morality?
Not that we can infer. No, we can only infer that which he has said about himself.
So you just believe whatever God says is moral, whatever. It's the basic
Well,
gist of it.
I hold that God has a specific nature, and that nature is unchanging.
Based on what? The Bible?
Based on the Bible, yes.
But not the 10 Commandments, though, at that point. Where are you getting this from in the Bible?
So the nature of God is encapsulated inside the 10 Commandments.
Inside the what?
Inside the ethical decalogue. I'm not going to call them the 10 Commandments.
Okay. How did you get to that point to come to that understanding? How do it just because God says something doesn't mean it's rooted in his nature?
I inferred it.
You inferred it.
Based on my understanding of the Bible.
The parts that you choose to believe.
From the entire thing.
Well, there's parts you don't believe in the Bible.
There's parts that I believe are allegory, metaphor, polemic.
What about the Levitical laws?
The Levitical laws were given to the Israelites. They are meant to follow
By
those.
God. Yeah. So the parts where you would kill transgender people, gay people, that was all given by the God and his morality that's rooted in his own nature.
Yeah, at the time, yeah, absolutely.
So it's still okay to kill gay people now under
Christopher?
It would be under religious.
Kill those faggots.
Is it justified?
Is that are you arguing? Well, no, I'm talking about for being gay. Well, I'm talking about the morality it's laid out in Leviticus.
That question would be for you to answer, Kathleen, whether or not it's justified.
So no, I don't think it's justified to kill a homosexual.
Why don't you think that it's justified to kill a homosexual if there's text that suggests that it is justified?
Because I see nowhere in the Bible that it says it's moral to kill or justified to kill a homosexual.
All right, we want to get into the whole bits on the semantics of that, of like the.
I mean, I'm trying to be very succinct. I've been practicing this, right? Short, sweet answers.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I've been told I need to give short, sweet answers. So
let's say that.
1 second, hey, Tom, can you put the link in the description, please?
Link to what?
To this Discord.
Oh, okay. So Kathleen, if you have, let's just take that you agree that the Levitical law includes commands for execution under certain circumstances.
I'll be right back, guys. Yep.
Correct. I also know that the arbiters of that law did everything possible to not carry out those decisions.
Right. It still doesn't change the fact that it's a moral command on high.
Yes,
from
there
God,
are
right?
prescriptions in the Bible that allow for executions, just as there are prescriptions in every law system on this planet to carry out.
Right. So do you agree that some of those provisions include execution for sexual immorality, which we would see in our society as just being activity between consenting adults?
Yes. Well,
okay. So
hold on.
All right.
Hold on. Roll that back. Consenting adults, our society, maybe not. I see prescriptions against executing people who molest children. I see prescriptions on people who rape eunuchs. I don't know if I see prescriptions on consensual sex.
Right. And so you would have to. I think that a lot of Christians disagree with you on that, obviously.
I am a heretic.
So, right, of course. So I guess there needs to be somebody else needs to figure out another spot where there's a weird execution command in the Bible. There's plenty of them.
Sure.
There's a spot in the Bible really where it says you should stone anyone to death that works on a Sunday or no, a Saturday.
Yeah, you
that's
can
a great
picking up
example.
sticks. Let's do picking up
Yeah.
sticks on a Sunday. That's a good one.
It's actually
So,
Saturday.
right, Sabbath. Yeah. So,
Sabbath.
so if you on the Sabbath, if you pick up sticks on the Sabbath, and God says it's justified to kill somebody at that point,
Mhm.
you know, would you agree that then that it's justified,
I
regardless of
believe,
like people trying
well,
not to?
actually, that's not a really good one. That's actually not a really good one because I believe Jesus answers that when his apostles break grain on Sabbath, and he answers them that they should not be killed. So
Right.
that's
So then
actually, we need to
Jesus.
find something else.
So now we get
Period
into
in
the
the
question.
temple.
Hold on.
Period in the temple.
Now
There's
we
a
get
good
into
one.
the question of why is this command in the Old Testament in the first place? Then is
Well,
this not the perfect word of God? Why is that there?
well, I think the command is there. I think Jesus basically said y'all don't understand what he meant. That y'all are being, that y'all are
So
not interpreting this
when
correct.
it's kill the guy who picks up sticks on the Sabbath, it doesn't mean kill the guy who picks up sticks on the Sabbath.
Yeah, I guess basically, yeah. I mean,
So-
I don't consider the
Like, is it
the
metaphorical?
well, let me throw this out. I don't consider the Levitical deuterocanonical laws to be moral anymore. They may have been
Right.
moral at a
That's
time,
another
but
thing. That's another weird, confusing thing too. Because if you're just going to say then that morality changed, how did morality change?
our
Is
morality
it
changed.
our morality? But this is God's commands, right? Unless you're going to say Levitical law doesn't come from God.
I think Levitical law.
You dropped. I don't know if you completed that sentence.
Hold on 1 second. Hello? Yeah? Hey.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Is Kathleen taking a call? Oh, she muted. That's good.
Oh, there we go.
The deal is that if Levitical law isn't moral, and it is the case that moral prescriptions are objective in virtue of their coming from God's word, then there's a contradiction there.
It's now either God's immoral or God just changes morality at his whim or something like that. There's a lot of
It's arbitrary.
each of those have
Yeah.
like fallouts. Yeah.
Also, Ocean, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just cooking right now. I see you up in my DMs, bruh.
I've been DMing you, bruh. You haven't been cooking for that long, have you?
No, but I've been doing a lot of shit away from my
I feel
computer
you.
and on my mobile. My bad.
Did the Discord
Cat?
link get put in the description?
No, not yet. Why?
People were asking for it.
You can just put it. You can just put it in the.
No, I can't. I can't. I would if I could.
Cat?
Ocean, did it go anywhere with that?
No, she took off before I was able to
Oh.
really make the point. We got to the point where basically what happens is she's got to make a choice between Levitical law being the command of God and still immoral or morality change somewhere. It looked like she was leaning towards morality changes at the whim of God, which is I don't know how we'd keep track of that.
It goes nowhere. Spoilers.
Yeah, it just makes everything arbitrary, and now nothing in the Bible is dependable because it could have changed.
That's true. I don't know when people just give up the ghost, man. It's all imaginary. Like old Christian. I don't know how anybody could read that book and honestly think that there's some wisdom and truth to it. I don't get it.
Well, you got to
No idiot.
understand there's some people that are, you got to understand that there's some people that are like raised into it, man.
No, that's true.
Yeah,
Like,
Declan said it tells you not to drink too much alcohol, so it's why. So
Oh,
you should ask
fuck.
him about that.
What?
That's cheap.
No,
Cheap.
but you're right.
Was
A lot
it
of it's
cheap?
people
Because
raised
that's
into it.
exactly what he said. And he was a giant cunt
remember.
about it, too.
What did I say?
Oh, that the Bible's wise because it tells you ought not drink too much wine because it's a.
No, what I said. No,
Oh, that's not what you said.
That's a fair or unfair misrepresentation, right? Someone
Okay.
said there was absolutely no wisdom whatsoever in Scripture.
No,
right?
no one said that.
Wisdom.
You were lying when you said that.
They categorize wisdom as being a form of useful information that you can use in the future, right? So I said, well, under that definition, yeah, there is wisdom in Scripture. Definitely. They said, give me one piece of information.
You're talking about is me.
Excuse me. Thank you.
And I didn't say either of those things.
Thank you. I'm speaking.
You're just going to lie. Don't talk.
I'm speaking. Thank you very much.
If you're just going to mischaracterize me, don't talk.
Yeah, look, there is one piece of information in there. Look at, for example, wine is a mocker, right? People commit all forms of debauchery being, i.e., something that's characterized as being negative in Scripture. Yeah, there is forms of wisdom in there.
So again, I didn't say that there was no wisdom whatsoever, and I also didn't define wisdom as anything that's useful. No, I didn't. I didn't do either of those things. JJ overheard the conversation. Did I do either of those things, JJ?
No.
Oh, like I'm gonna.
No, exactly.
Like anyone in here really takes JJ's word.
No,
like
exactly. Neither you're retarded or a liar. Take your pick on which one.
Take you, JJ.
I'm sick of this arguing.
Look, don't engage me if you're gonna lie, Dick. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just pathetic. Skylar, do you consider yourself a moral realist?
No, I don't believe in.
Okay.
No, I'm anti-moralist. I believe morals are just created by the individual, through emotions, opinions, all that fun stuff.
Right.
Some are taught, though. I mean, sometimes we're just taught stuff that we think is right and wrong, and I don't think we reevaluate it till we're older. Sometimes, or sometimes you just stick with it for some reason.
Are you a physicalist?
I don't know. I don't know if I'd call myself. I haven't really thought about it too much, to be honest with you. Physicalist would just believe you believe there's well, give me a definition of it. Let me see.
It's a monist view saying that there's one substance and then it's there's only, and it abides by some sort of law-like relation.
I don't know. To be honest with you, I haven't really thought about it.
There's two different versions of physicalism. There's non-reductionist and reductionist. The reductionist wants to say like the language we use and the things that we talk about when we refer to like the brain and stuff and the mind can be reduced to the physical. And the non-reductionist says that we can't reduce those to the physical, but the things are physical, but the language we use for it and such cannot be reduced to the physical.
There's semantic reduction and ontological reduction.
All right.
Yeah, that would have to be something I look up and think about for a while.
Yeah, there's people in here that believe that rocks have intentions.
Oh, imagine they define that in different ways. That's how you define intention.
Right.
Wait, what's the argument that they don't, Joe?
I define intentions as
kidding.
rocks not having.
Stop! I'm kidding.
I really wanted to hear that.
He was just going to define rocks as not having intention. So it's analytic that they.
No. That's not what it is. I don't define a rock as not having intentions. I define intention as the way we normally define it, but with the caveat that rocks don't have that.
Ah, okay.
We need to spend a lot of time on the definition of atheism, guys.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we do something innovative and do the definition of theism now?
I've seen a lot of argumentation over that too.
Ocean, did you notice that Non Sequitur finally put a video up after a week?
I mean, yeah.
And did you also notice that Steve McRae has had at least one, if not two, live shows per day all about the definition of atheism?
I haven't been keeping track, but I've seen it in an inordinate amount.
So Jovan, if you don't mind me, do you still identify as a physicalist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but didn't you concede the point with respect to the rule following?
Yeah.
Do you have a response to the paradox?
No.
You don't think it's fatal to physicalism?
Tone of voice is amazing. No.
Your argument is valid and sound, but I'll keep my.
I mean, beliefs aren't necessitated.
Oh, I'm just picking on you.
Yeah. The beliefs you have aren't caused directly by the propositions of evil.
Sorry
What's
about
the
that
rule following
motion,
paradox have to do
whoever
with
was
physical?
Actually, that was a little odd to say that.
What was
Kathleen's
that
back.
about?
Kathleen's back.
Yeah, I'm back. My mother-in-law
Oh,
called me.
I never
Do we
really
want to
know
hear?
when that excited.
Do we want to
we've
hear
moved on,
Kathleen
Kathleen.
return?
Do we want to
We've moved
hear
on, Kathleen.
philosophy, or do we want to hear God is?
Oh, I don't care what you guys.
Why,
Give me God
why
is.
is there
It
a
doesn't
choice?
matter to
There's
me.
no-
Hit me with
there's
that
no
God
choice.
is, fam.
Yeah. I'll,
No, we have moved on.
God is philosophy.
It's too late. That
That's
moment
the
has
correct
passed.
answer.
Say
Whoever
God
said
is
that.
for 100, Alex.
God just is. Anyway,
Can we
play
just say-
the sermon.
oh my
So
god.
when you were shooting up the church in that sermon, Kathleen, what kind of gun were you using?
That was not me shooting up the sermon. That was them shooting me.
Oh, I
Yeah.
thought it was you shooting up the sermon.
That seems morally justified.
That's the way
Because you
I
said-
took it.
because
Is
you
that
started
someone walked
singing
in.
"Baby, I'm a firecracker" or whatever, and then everyone started screaming as the gunshots went off. So I took that to mean that you were shooting them.
Yeah, I took it to me they were shooting me after.
Oh no, I
said
took
I
it to
had an
mean
addiction
I think
to
you
Those
were
were
shooting
just
them.
fireworks.
We'll have to
Just
ask.
fireworks.
We'll have to ask Penis Tooth.
Yeah.
because
So-
only he knows for sure.
So MJ, your question was, what does the rule following argument have to do with what?
Physicalism.
You cut out. What?
So why you were asking something about the rule following argument?
What did it have to do with physicalism? I was just curious.
The paradox is supposed to show that intentional states are not going to be reducible to a physical antecedent.
Physical facts underdetermined.
Oh,
Right,
does it
right,
have to
like-
do with,
like, have you-
multiple realizability and all that?
Right. Have you heard the plus and quus example?
Haven't, no.
Okay, so like you add numbers up to and including 58 as you normally would. 6 plus 6 is 12, 8 plus 8 is 16, so on and so forth. But then there's a rule when you add numbers past 58 called quus, where the sum, as long as the sum is greater than 58, the result's always going to be 4, right? So 59 plus 59. And the idea is there's a presumably infinite number of these rules in place at any given time that you're not aware of. So for instance, there could be another rule that like anytime you multiply even numbers, it's going to be 1. You get the idea. So it's just going to be, the point is just to show that, as Jovan said, physical facts are underdetermined, right? All that's going to be determining whether or not something is correct or incorrect is the intentions of whoever's adding the. A better example is to say, like, there's 2 robots. A programmer programs them to collect apples. One robot hits a tree, and now it's suddenly collecting blueberries instead of apples. What are you going to appeal to physically that explains the fact that the robot is doing something wrong, if not an intention? The intention of the programmer, anyway. Because, right, the robot's just following certain programs, right? Or certain lines of code. What it's doing can't be wrong unless you say it's wrong because it's not what the programmer intended.
I think I follow. I'd have to think about that a little bit.
Cool.
How complex the programming is, right?
Right. Like if I
Typically
make
what
one
happens
robot has
with
reached
like the
AI.
zombie argument, for example, like it's usually a clash between one person's modus ponens and another person's modus tollens, but like
right, because like
might say that identical functionality, but
because if you want to,
in one
like, if
case
you
have
want to,
a zombie, in another case you have a person with consciousness.
I
think that-
didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say briefly
Go
that
ahead. Sorry.
like the robot, if you try to appeal to something physical to say that the robot who's collecting blueberries is now doing something wrong, right? It doesn't seem like you're going to be able to appeal to anything. The fact that it bumped into the tree and began collecting blueberries can't be wrong unless, like I said, it's out of accord with somebody's intent.
Any rule can be made out to accord with the action. Is the problem, right? So if you commit action X, rule Y can be made out to accord with that rule. So the physical facts underdetermine what rule you are following. The only thing that we can appeal to is something like intentionality.
Right.
There's a causal relationship between the bump of the tree and the change of behavior of the robot.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I can't account to anything.
You can use it as a causal
functional in the robot?
explanation, right? But you couldn't explain why it's malfunctioning.
Right, that's
What
the point.
motivates that
Because think
intuition?
about the
I'm
example.
not
Think about an example of another robot identical to it that was created by a tornado. That was not created by somebody with intention, but was created by a tornado. Just a dispositional set of laws, right? And then that robot went on to hit a tree, and then it went on to do the exact same thing. Would you say that's malfunctioning?
This is the problem I have with like thought experiments. I'd have to see what the programmatic kind of structure that constitutes.
Wait, but no, that look.
Oh yeah, my bad. The two robots are physically identical.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. That's
The robot made by the creator and the robot made by the tornado are both physically identical. They both
Do you
do
see
the
the
same
intuition
action.
clash, though? Do you see the intuition clash? So the people that disagree with you are going to say that if there is a change of behavior because of the bump in the tree, that implies that they're not identical. That would be the intuition clash.
But that doesn't matter.
Well, both of them bump into a tree and change in the exact same way. There's no difference. Now, for you to say there's something different, you'd have to say there's a contradiction until.
Be functionally identical? Yeah, I could see like a functional identity.
Physically identical.
Right.
Right.
Look,
Functionalism is typically coupled with physicalism.
Right.
I'm trying to
There's one robot that
the
collects.
same way.
Sorry, go ahead. Hello?
I mean to cut you off. Is that my
Oh,
I can't hear you
no.
anymore.
Yeah, you're fine. Look, it's just the point is this, right? You have two robots, and they're both designed by a programmer. We'll throw in the tornado thing in a second, right? And then you set them loose to collect apples, and one of them bumps into a tree and begins collecting blueberries, right? If you want to make the claim that the robot collecting blueberries is now malfunctioning, right, doing something wrong, it doesn't seem like you're going to be able to appeal to anything physical. You're going to have to appeal to the intentions of the programmer, the intention being he wants them to collect apples.
I see what you're saying. Is it a derivative intentionality then from the designer of the robot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like we're not saying the robots themselves have intentions. We're just saying like they're basically.
Couldn't you say that the intentions of the designer are physical though?
I mean, look, this.
Go ahead, Alex. What the fuck is with people like cutting out today?
Because all physical facts.
It's Discord.
Because all physical facts.
Do we need to change the location of the server?
Yeah, we need to do it again because this was happening earlier today, and everybody is cutting out for me. I'm losing connection like every 5 minutes, so we do need to do that.
I've already changed the server. What do you want? What server you want me to change it to?
I reconnected.
I don't know.
That's better. So the idea is just to illuminate the notion of like normativity, right?
All right, I changed it to US East. I think it's gonna do anything.
Go ahead, Al. Are you there, Al?
Got worse.
You couldn't hear him? He was just talking, but he was choppy. Can you move it further east?
I had reconnected.
It's US East. Is there further east than US East?
All right. I don't know.
I don't know if it's working or not.
No,
Can I
you're
be heard?
good. Yeah, you're good.
Are we good now?
Okay, I will try to be quick. So it's just to illuminate the idea of normativity, right? Of standards, and it's to say that we can't achieve a standard, a right or wrongness, right? Whether it's in or out of accord, right? This accordance relationship purely through physical means. There's nothing we could point to physically that would undermine the physical state of something else.
Right.
Yeah, correct. Is MJ still with us?
No, yeah, I'm just thinking about it because I struggle with modal skepticism sometimes, and with thought experiments, there's no way to kind of I know it's an a priori thought experiment, but when my imagination interacts with it, I always want to be like, I wish I could open up this robot and see what the mechanical algorithms are, and see whether or not there is a causal connection between the bump in the tree and some kind of change in the programming.
Right.
That wouldn't
It
have to
is
be
just
right.
stipulated though that there is one.
Right.
That's
That would.
what I meant,
That would.
not the intuition clash, because in that particular case, it's hard for me to kind of go along with it, but it could be a failure of imagination on my part.
Are you saying that intuitively you think that for the robot after bumping into the tree to begin collecting blueberries, right? There has to be some protocol in place basically beforehand that would allow for that in the first.
Yeah, something inherent in the functionality of the programming in terms of some kind of algorithm, some kind of input-output relationship or something. That's my intuition.
Well, you can think about it somewhat like a computer that shows a blue screen, the blue screen of death or something, instead of the regular screen. That's malfunctioning.
Oh,
right?
agreed.
But it's not. It's not something like that was in. Like you can say it was intended by the creator that happens in some like fashion, but the fact it happening was still causal to the damage that was or the erosion of certain parts.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So the erosion and all that stuff, I feel like that would just be a natural causal disposition of the malfunctioning of the robotic programming.
Let's
And I
think
wouldn't
about it
have to
this
infer
way.
any kind of intentionality. But
Sure. Let's think about it this way, right? Like let's assume you're correct. There's something coded into the robot to allow it to begin collecting apples in the event of a collision like that, right? But the only stipulation that matters with respect to the thought experiment is the programmer intending for the robots to collect apples, not blueberries. Even if there's some protocol in place for blueberry collection, he wants them to collect apples.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as the robot bumps into the tree and begins collecting blueberries, we would say it's out of accord with the programmer's intentions, therefore malfunctioning.
right. And so imply that see, this is where I'm getting a hiccup. So this wouldn't imply that the robotic system itself has an immaterial property, right?
No, we're just talking about the intentions of the programmer being passed to the robot. You put it some way earlier, and I forget what term you used.
And the intentions are non-reductive?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
I thought you were giving me an example of like a non-reductive physicalism. This rule-following paradox would imply a non-reductive.
No, I'm referencing something you said earlier. You said the intentions were like, I forget the term you used, but you said passed down by a design. Right, yeah.
Derivative?
Yes, the intentions are derivative.
And derivativeness for me isn't a substantival property. That would just be a relational property between designer and designed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And was I wrong to think that you were giving me an example that would be implied by the rule following paradox in terms of experiment talking about a particular instance of non-reductive physicalism? Did I just go off the road on accident?
No, I'm not exactly sure, to be honest, but
because my initial question was, how did the rule following paradox have to do with physicalism?
Right. We were just saying like, so the context was
determination, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
The context was Jovan is a physicalist, and he was given this paradox, right? And he conceded that the paradox did pose a problem, and that he couldn't think of a resolution to the problem. So I was picking on him and saying, why are you still a physicalist, right? Because it seems like that would be fatal to the physicalist view.
But not non-reductive fatalism, though, right?
Right.
Just reductive.
Right.
Yeah. So, and what would be the non-reductive? Why would it be non-reductive? Would it be a semantic property or a substantival property that's non-reductive?
This is above. I think this is above my pay grade. I honestly don't know.
Well, me too. That's why I'm just probing. I never thought about that before.
Yeah, go fucking talk to Jack about your opinion, Pogan.
Yeah. So I was just commenting. I was just talking about the conversation with somebody back channel, and I said, look, if MJ really wants to, he could do the turn and say that intentions are necessitated by an intelligent designer, given the rule following argument that's being presented.
It's
impossible.
impossible.
I'd have to establish. Yeah.
It's impossible for robots to malfunction.
But you're still appealing to an intention, man. That's all you.
I would have to establish some kind of analogy between the intentional systems that we all have experience of in terms of robotic systems, and then biological organisms and abducing a designer god. That'd be quite a project. I don't know if I
Sure,
have
but
mental
at least in the
equipment to
scenario
go about that.
offered, right, sure, but at least in the scenario offered, we can't say that the robots themselves have intention. It's in virtue of the intention of the designer.
Exactly.
A sort of counter thought, which is brought up as a common example, is a lightning strike. So if we watch a lightning bolt strike a tree, strike a barn that's next to a tree, why is it that we don't say the lightning bolt made a mistake?
Right. Or that it hit its target.
Intend to not make a mistake.
So now that we all agree physicalism is false, we can move on.
It's just a language thing. Why would that convince anybody?
Well, it's a conceptual thing.
No, it's not. You said, why don't
Showing,
we say it?
Well, yeah, it's to show that we have a different conception of one thing over the other, right? When we say that the robot is malfunctioning, that's different than what we mean when we say that the lightning bolt is malfunctioning. Or why don't we refer to the lightning bolt as missing its target when we say, like, when you throw a dart at a thing and you miss the bullseye that you missed?
It's like I don't want to get like too like into it because I might sound a bit mystic, I guess. But like, as far as I can tell, right, the dilemma seems to be if you believe there are relationships in the world between things, right? Then how do you explain what relationships are? Because they don't seem to be physical things, right? So what's left? What's this non-binding physical thing?
Just say their descriptions.
The description's physical? Like the descriptions in themselves?
Well, some people would think that dichotomy wouldn't even apply to that category.
Yeah.
Descriptions are just kind of semantic. Non-physical would apply to ontology. Unless you're a Platonist with regard to semantic properties, but I don't think that's very
it's
popular.
just all referring to the physical.
So maybe you could have descriptions of relationships without reifying relational properties, I guess, maybe. No, I think Russell did that near the beginning. He gave it up, though.
MJ, you were around for it. What did you think about our conversation before about objective morality being founded in God? And there were a few people who were saying, including myself, that you couldn't even be making moral evaluation about God's judgments because all moral judgments would be grounded in God. So essentially, it would be God's judgments, not your own. And you could be out of accord with that by saying that certain seemingly morally abhorrent actions in the Bible were wrong. You would be wrong about that because ultimately those things were good.
Yeah, that's really complicated issues. I probably have to take that one step at a time. Completely imperfect because I'm spitballing right now, but my position on the table, I do think God's nature is the standard as far as grounding the objectivity of what I think are my moral judgments. Distinction between moral universals and cultural universals in the Pentateuch. Don't think that would keep me from being able to make moral judgments or judgments that approximate to God's standard.
Wait,
how do you
sure,
account-
but wait, Yuri, please.
Yeah, I might have missed something.
No. So what I'm saying is that means that you would agree that like the things that occurred in the Bible, dashing children against rocks, killing suckling infants, those things were good, correct? On your view?
I have an idiosyncratic view on this. No, I think they were morally wrong.
Okay, but these were things. So how do you distinguish them? Sure, right. But like, what context makes these things morally wrong when they were ordered by God? Right? If God is the standard.
So I have kind of a weird view on this. I recommend a book by Nicholas Walter Storff called Divine Discourse, and basically his thesis in that book, and I find it persuasive, is that anytime you come to a part in the Bible that you find morally abhorrent or doesn't agree with, like the whole council of biblical and systematic theology on the relationship between God and morality and us, you have God appropriating the morally abhorrent speech acts of the biblical authors for a wider contextual point. Speech acts, which goes to J.L. Austin's speech act theory, as Walter Storff appropriates this, and he'll say that God can appropriate the speech acts of the biblical authors, even if the biblical authors say, like, God said or God ordered, by the author, that God has appropriated in a canonical context in order to establish a wider, deeper, richer moral point in the context of a narrative.
Sounds to me like that's a
Bible
long way of
passages.
just saying that it's morally good.
It would be morally bad. So God would be appropriating morally bad speech acts. In itself would be a speech act in itself, and the speech act would go to, like, this is in the context of a narrative in which these bad things will, like some kind of moral of a story or something like that, with the narratives themselves.
But if there was ever a greater good that could be achieved, then those things by God adopting those commissive speech acts, then it would make it the case that his adopting that bad language would ultimately be good, right? And what you're wanting to say, I think, is that what I'm calling bad is the language, not the act. Is that correct?
It would be. I wouldn't ascribe a moral property to the language. I think that might be kind of weird. I wouldn't understand that. It would be what's appropriated would be the speech acts. So that's like a subset of language, and because they're about moral states of affairs, basically, if Walter Storff's thesis goes through, is that he didn't literally acts are literally saying God told them to do, because they're morally abhorrent.
So you're taking like a non-literalist view of the Bible in these instances. Like you're saying this is wrong,
level, yeah.
but
Right.
Okay.
Literalness, as in terms, God literally appropriates the speech acts, but then the speech acts themselves are either false or figurative. I'd say, like, the Israeli nation was caught up in their nationalistic fervor, and they just nationalistic fervor. God told us to do this, and God appropriated that inaccurate and false speech act. True in the sense that they said it, but false in the sense that they say God told them to do it. Conflicts with the whole council of biblical and systematic theology.
Okay. That seems kind of weird to me, because it sounded like, perhaps I misheard you, but it seemed like in that last thing that you said that God did use the language, right? But he didn't, like, literally tell them to do it.
So yeah, so if you isolate
I have
a
that
particular, I would finesse it a little bit and say, like, if you were to, like, pick a verse, like, say, I don't know, Deuteronomy 15, where it says that God ordered people to enslave the women, that they just conquered this area, and the women and children are left, and maybe they slaved the children and forced the virgins to marry them, something like that, so morally abhorrent and disgusting. What Walter Storff would say is that a problem with that, and God is love and God is the standard of morality. What you can do is you can postulate a theory that would be able to reconcile those two pieces of data. And so that speech act itself, whoever wrote Deuteronomy, that's literally false, because God would never do that. That would be a counterpossible or something so morally disgusting. But God would have appropriated that speech act and included it in the canon, establish some kind of wider moral from the narrative as a whole.
See, but that to me just seems like flowery language to say this very thing. Like, kind of did it, but he kind of didn't, right? It's kind of the distinction that people make between, like, creative, decretive, passive, permissive wills with God. It's not really explaining anything. It's just like sort of saying he kind of did, he kind of didn't. and we can't really distinguish in what way he did and what way he didn't, right? If it means to adopt somebody's speech acts, right, I don't know what that would mean, right? It seems to me like the layman Christian just doesn't have access to like making these like moral judgments like you have, like you yourself are a scholar, and it seems like a stretch to say that in order to fully understand what God had intended, I have to get to MJ's level of scholarship in order to understand it.
If particular Christians or critics struggle with that, I do my best. Walter Storff published a book for it's publicly accessible. This needs to trickle down to the seminaries and to the pastors and to the congregations, and it needs to get out there more. Unfortunately, fundamentalism stifles that. Exploring other options and biting that hard bullet, swallowing that pill of making God look demonic and endorsing theological voluntarism or things like that. But in terms of willing or doing or not doing, what I do is, since I'm a Molinist, I do think he is active in creation. I do think he strongly actualizes a particular world. And in that sense, he has sovereignly chosen what takes place in the world from middle to free knowledge. What happens is God doesn't determine the truth values of the counterfactuals, the creatures do, and he permits it. From the Calvinistic distinction between permissive and decretive wills, because they actually make God determine the truth value of the propositions that describe creaturely free will actions, whereas the Molinist puts that knowledge prior to the decree. Me out a lot because God would be sovereign over instantiating the propositions true, but he wouldn't. The creature makes them true. They're true prior to the decree, which was Malena's innovation.
Yeah, I think as long as there exists divine foreknowledge that the future is closed, and if the future is closed, then there is no such thing as creaturely free will. That's my view. I don't see how Molinism like actually escapes this issue. If there is foreknowledge and things are going to happen, but it means at time T2, the agent couldn't have done anything otherwise, right? It could be the case that there's such a thing as middle knowledge. Go ahead.
What really helped me with that is an analogy I heard, and I really want to know what you think of this. So the relationship between creaturely action in time after God decrees a particular world and middle knowledge is the relationship between a barometer and the weather. Barometer's infallible, right? Have you heard this analogy?
No.
Barometer reads the weather, right? It's never wrong, but it screens off the weather. The weather isn't determined by the barometer. And so the same kind of asymmetric relationship would hold between whatever happens in a world and the contents of God's middle knowledge, which really helped me a lot. There's not a causal or determinative or necessary relationship at all.
But that's to exclude foreknowledge from that evaluation. What I'm saying is that foreknowledge closes the future, right? The future is closed to us. There's only going to be one outcome, right? And if that's the case, it doesn't matter what middle knowledge or what sort of theory one has, as long as there exists a will happen that is foreknowledge that the future is closed. It doesn't matter like what our like how we perceive time in the time that we currently inhabit, or our choices in the time we currently inhabit. As long as there exists foreknowledge, then it's closed. And I don't understand like how Molinism gets us out of that.
The only reason why I don't have a problem with it is that one future necessary, which I think is sufficient for free will. That's the only thing I think I wouldn't have a problem with it. I do agree, metaphysically speaking, one future will unfurl in accordance with the free decisions of creatures. Then because knowledge screens off that, really decisions are logically prior to the knowledge. The knowledge isn't determining the creaturely action. That would I'm good with that, as long as it's not necessary and there's no causal relationship between the decree and the truth. That's what helps me out.
Well, like, do you hold the view that God's foreknowledge is contingent on created creatures?
I do. So he has middle knowledge.
Because you're an open theist then.
Open theists don't like middle knowledge very much. Foreknowledge would be
Yeah,
a subset of mental knowledge. So mental knowledge is all, knowledge of all that would happen, even if he didn't create. Currently chooses a subset of counterfactuals from his mental knowledge, makes them true of a particular world, and then has foreknowledge. So it's kind of the degree. It's posterior to the degree.
but at the same time, you would not be rejecting the idea that there is going to be one world, as you said, that would unfurl. And I just can't reconcile. I don't see how it does, even through counterfactuals. Reconcile the idea that like there is one way that things are going to happen. We're determining it.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. Yeah. And what I'm saying, yeah, I think we're going to be talking past one another because of like different assumptions in our views, but I just don't see how it reconciles.
What helped me is that innovation that Molina did. That's the sticking point for me. So as long as the counterfactuals are true prior to the decree, independent of the decree, God can't make them true. The middle knowledge is necessary to God, but the content of the middle knowledge is contingent that make them true. And then what God does, he just instantiates a particular set of counterfactuals. Or truth value, just determine their instantiation. That's all he did. The creatures determine the truth, like the weather would determine the reading on a barometer. There wouldn't be a necessary unfurling, the inevitable unfurling, in accordance with however the creatures freely act.
Yeah, that makes no sense to me. That makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Those conceptual distinctions help me out a lot. That's why there was a huge debate in the Counter-Reformation between Molina and Suarez and a lot of the Calvinists about why are you putting mental knowledge prior to the decree? You cannot do that because they have no problem with mental knowledge. They just want to put it after the decree. Then God determines those truth values, and so the creatures can't be free, and you have a necessary future. So Molina's like,
yeah,
oh,
I
let's
think
just
you have
put
a
mental knowledge
necessary
prior to the
future as
decree.
long as they're. Yeah, I don't think that gets us out of the problem. I think as like I said for the third or fourth time, as long as there exists, a will happen, and God has that, the future is closed. To me, that's as simple as it gets. And this is like 7 steps deeper than most laymen get, right? So it seems to me like if belief is necessary for one's soteriology, and they have like questions about this, and this all just seems like nonsense. Like, how can I have free will? But they don't have the same awareness as this, and they walk away from it. It's like not their fault. Like, why would a soteriology rest on somebody's belief in something that requires such academic rigor and philosophical
I don't think it does.
precision as the discussion that we're having here?
Does. I think these kind of discussions are probably going to be interesting to about 0.0001% of the population. So
sure. And you think that like somebody who